The Auction of Despair. The air in the auction hall hung heavy with the stench of sweat, desperation, and oil from rusted machinery. Dim lights flickered overhead, casting uneven shadows on the stage where chained captives were paraded like livestock. Among them was a figure whose defiance stood out even in her worn state. Her name was Zara, a sapphire-skinned alien with piercing violet eyes that dared to challenge the universe, even as iron chains bound her hands and feet. The auctioneer, a bloated figure with a sinister grin, stepped forward, his voice oozing with mock enthusiasm. "Ladies and gentlemen, behold this rare treasure, a Zara. Strong, resilient, and fiercely independent. Perfect for the mines, security, or simply as a symbol of your unparalleled wealth." His laughter echoed through the room, met with murmurs of intrigue from the crowd. Hidden among the spectators stood Cade, a human shrouded in a tattered cloak. He observed the spectacle with a mix of anger and determination. Unlike the others, his gaze didn't seek to appraise Zara as an asset but as a soul deserving freedom. His fists clenched as the bidding began. 5,000 credits, one voice called out. 7,000. The numbers rose rapidly, each bid hammering Zara's spirit further into the ground. She stared at the floor, her defiance dimming until a single voice cut through the noise. 15,000 credits. The room fell silent, heads turning to locate the source of the outrageous bid. Cade stepped forward, his face shadowed but his intent clear. "Transfer the funds now," he said, holding out a handheld device. The auctioneer hesitated, greed overtaking suspicion. "Sold," he bellowed. Cade climbed onto the stage, his movements calm yet purposeful. Kneeling before Zara, he unlocked the chains. She flinched, her violet eyes narrowing as she whispered, "Do you think this makes you my savior?" Cade smiled faintly. "No, but it makes you free." The silence in the hall turned to murmurs of discontent as Cade led Zara away. Some among the bidders eyed him with envy, others with hostility. Zara's voice cut through the tension as they entered a narrow alley. "Why did you do it?" Cade shrugged. "Because someone had to." Their conversation was cut short by the sound of heavy boots pounding against metal. The slavers weren't willing to let such an expensive purchase walk away so easily. "Stay close," Cade murmured, pulling a compact blaster from his belt. Zara's eyes gleamed with renewed defiance as she picked up a discarded pipe. "I've been caged long enough. Let them come." The first slaver appeared at the alley's entrance, a brutish figure wielding a stun baton. Zara didn't wait for instructions. She lunged forward, her movements swift and precise, delivering a blow that sent the weapon clattering to the ground. "Impressive," Cade muttered as he fired at another assailant. Zara glanced back with a smirk. "Try to keep up, human." As more slavers poured into the alley, Cade and Zara stood back to back, an unspoken alliance forming amidst the chaos. The metallic clang of boots echoed through the narrow alleyways, amplifying the urgency of their escape. Zara's sharp hearing caught the low murmur of slavers communicating through earpieces. They were organized and relentless. She clenched her makeshift weapon, a rusted pipe, tightly in her hands. "They're closing in," she said, her voice steady despite the tension. Cade glanced over his shoulder, his blaster raised. "They won't catch us. Stick close, and don't slow down." The alley twisted and turned like a maze, the dim lights overhead barely illuminating their path. Zara's instincts kept her aware of the slavers' movements. She could hear their heavy breathing, the hiss of their stun batons charging, and the occasional barked order. From the shadows, a hulking slaver emerged, his baton crackling with energy. He swung at Zara, but she sidestepped effortlessly, the pipe in her hands arcing down to crack against his knee. The slaver crumpled with a grunt, his weapon clattering uselessly to the ground. "Not bad," Cade said as he fired at another figure darting toward them. His shot struck true, sending the attacker sprawling. "You're not the only one who knows how to fight," Zara retorted, her tone carrying a hint of pride. More slavers appeared, their sheer numbers threatening to overwhelm. Zara's violet eyes darted toward a pile of crates stacked near a dead end. "Up there," she shouted, already sprinting toward them. Cade followed without question, climbing the crates with practiced ease. From the top, they could see the slavers spreading out below, their searchlights slicing through the darkness. Cade pulled out a small device from his jacket and handed it to Zara. "EMP grenade," he explained. "Throw it when I say." Zara nodded, her fingers curling around the small device. She watched as the slavers' drones hovered closer, their red lights blinking ominously. Cade aimed his blaster, taking out one of the machines with a precise shot. "Now," he shouted. Zara hurled the grenade into the air. A pulse of blue light radiated outward, and the drones sparked and fell from the sky like dead birds. The slavers cursed as their equipment malfunctioned, their communication devices crackling with static. "That'll slow them down," Cade said, hopping off the crates and landing with a thud. But not for long. Zara followed, landing beside him with feline grace. Her sharp gaze locked on his. "What's your plan, human?" "Because running won't keep us alive forever." Cade smirked. "We're not just running. We're heading somewhere." She narrowed her eyes, suspicious. "Where?" "A safe house," he replied, already moving. "It's close, and it's secure. But we need to get there before they regroup." The two moved quickly, their breaths visible in the cold night air. The hum of engines grew louder overhead, searchlights sweeping the area. Zara's acute senses picked up the faint sound of footsteps approaching fast. "We're about to have company," she warned. Cade nodded, his grip tightening on his blaster. "Then let's give them something to remember." The first slaver rounded the corner, his blaster raised. Zara was faster, her pipe striking the weapon out of his hands before delivering a brutal jab to his gut. The slaver doubled over, groaning in pain. Cade fired at another attacker, his aim precise and efficient. "Nice work," he said, glancing at Zara. She smirked, the faintest hint of respect in her eyes. "You're not bad yourself." The pair continued to fight their way through the slavers, their movements synchronized as if they had trained together for years. For Zara, the defiance that had kept her spirit alive during her captivity now burned brighter than ever. For Cade, every step forward solidified his resolve to see this through. As they approached the edge of the slums, Cade slowed, motioning for Zara to follow him into a hidden alley. He pressed a code into a keypad on a seemingly abandoned door, and it slid open with a quiet hiss. "Inside," he urged. Zara hesitated, her distrust of him still lingering. But the sound of approaching boots left her no choice. She stepped inside, and the door sealed behind them. The room was sparse but functional, lit by a single dim bulb. Cade moved to a console in the corner, activating the building's security systems. A soft hum indicated the defenses were online. "This will hold them off for now," Cade said, turning to face Zara. "But we'll need to move again soon." Zara crossed her arms, studying him. "Why are you helping me? What do you gain from this?" Cade met her gaze, his expression serious. "Because I've seen too many people like you treated like nothing. If I can stop that, even for one person, it's worth it." Her eyes softened slightly, though her guard remained up. "You're either very noble or very foolish." "Maybe both," he admitted with a small smile. Before she could respond, the building's alarm beeped. The slavers had tracked them. Zara gripped her pipe, the fire in her eyes reigniting. "They're coming," she said. Cade nodded, his blaster ready. "Then let's make them regret it." Together, they prepared for the next wave, their fragile alliance forged stronger by the heat of battle. The escape route unfolds. The sharp beeping of the alarm reverberated through the small safe house, accompanied by the faint sound of slavers outside. Their muffled orders and heavy footsteps sent an unmistakable message: they were out for blood. Zara tightened her grip on the rusted pipe, her violet eyes blazing with determination. "Do you have a plan, or are we improvising?" she asked, her voice laced with dry humor. Cade glanced at her, his expression focused. "We're doing both." He moved swiftly to the console, pressing several buttons. A holographic map of the surrounding area flickered to life. He pointed to a series of underground tunnels marked in blue. "These lead to an old sewer system. It's risky, but it'll get us out of here unnoticed." Zara frowned, studying the map. "Sewer systems. Fantastic. From one pit of despair to another." "Unless you want to fight an army, it's our best option," Cade replied, already moving to the far wall. He pressed a hidden panel, revealing a narrow hatch. "Let's go." The sound of boots pounding against the metal door made Zara's decision for her. She followed Cade into the hatch, the tight space forcing her to crouch as they descended into darkness. The air grew damp and cold, the faint scent of rust and mildew filling her nostrils. Cade activated a small flashlight, its beam cutting through the gloom. "Stay close. These tunnels are a maze if you don't know the way." "Don't worry about me," Zara said, her tone defiant. "Worry about yourself." They moved quickly, the sound of the slavers breaking into the safe house echoing faintly above. Zara's acute hearing picked up their frustrated shouts and the unmistakable clang of boots on metal as they began searching for the pair. Cade paused at a fork in the tunnel, consulting a small device on his wrist. "Left," he murmured, leading the way. As they navigated the labyrinth, Zara couldn't help but study her unlikely ally. His movements were calculated, his expression calm despite the danger. There was something about him that unsettled her, a sense of purpose she couldn't quite understand. "What's your story, human?" she asked suddenly. Cade glanced back at her, surprised. "What do you mean?" "You don't seem like the typical slaver or mercenary," Zara said, her voice quieter now. "Why risk your life for someone like me?" Cade hesitated, his gaze softening. "Because I've been where you are. Helpless, cornered, treated like nothing. Someone saved me once, and now I repay the favor when I can." Zara's expression shifted, a flicker of understanding passing over her features. She nodded slightly, her grip on the pipe relaxing just a fraction. Before she could respond, a loud metallic clang echoed through the tunnels. Cade stopped abruptly, his hand raised for silence. He motioned for Zara to extinguish her light. The faint glow of searchlights filtered into the tunnel ahead, accompanied by the low hum of a drone. Zara's heart raced as she pressed herself against the damp wall, her breath shallow. "They're sweeping the tunnels," Cade whispered. Zara tensed, her sharp ears picking up the soft mechanical whir of the drone growing closer. She gripped the pipe tightly, ready to strike if needed. Cade pulled out a compact device and handed it to her. "Another EMP. It's got a short range, but it'll do the job. Wait for my signal." The drone's red light appeared around the corner, scanning methodically. Cade counted under his breath, timing its movements. "Now," he hissed. Zara hurled the device into the air. A pulse of blue light filled the tunnel, and the drone sputtered before crashing to the ground in a heap of sparking metal. "Nice throw," Cade said, motioning for her to follow as they hurried past the wreckage. They continued through the twisting tunnels, the tension thick between them. The sounds of pursuit faded, but neither dared to slow down. Eventually, the tunnel opened into a larger chamber, its walls lined with old pipes and valves. "This is it," Cade said, stopping in front of a rusted ladder. "This leads to an abandoned industrial zone. Once we're there, we'll have more options to lose them." Zara eyed the ladder warily. "And if they're waiting for us at the top?" "Then we improvise," Cade replied with a faint smirk. She sighed, gripping the rungs and beginning to climb. Cade followed close behind, his blaster at the ready. As Zara pushed open the hatch, she squinted against the sudden light. The industrial zone was a sprawling wasteland of crumbling buildings and rusted machinery. The air was thick with the smell of oil and decay. "Stay low," Cade said, climbing out beside her. He scanned the area, his eyes narrowing. "They're not here yet, but we need to keep moving." Zara nodded, her muscles tense as they weaved through the debris. For the first time since her capture, she felt a glimmer of hope. But as they reached the edge of the zone, that hope was shattered. A group of slavers emerged from the shadows, their weapons raised. Cade cursed under his breath. "Looks like they beat us here." Zara stepped forward, her pipe held tightly in her hands. Her violet eyes blazed with defiance. "Good. Let's finish this." The slavers formed a loose semicircle around Cade and Zara, their weapons aimed and their faces twisted with cruel confidence. The leader, a scarred brute with a mechanical arm, stepped forward, his voice grating like metal on stone. "End of the line, human. Hand over the Zarathan, and maybe we'll let you live." Cade's grip on his blaster tightened. "Not a chance." Zara stepped beside him, her rusted pipe raised like a sword. "You're welcome to try, but you'll regret it." The slavers laughed, the sound echoing through the desolate industrial zone. The leader sneered. "So be it. Take them." The first attacker charged, his stun baton crackling with energy. Zara moved with precision, sidestepping his swing and countering with a swift blow to his head. He crumpled to the ground, unconscious. Cade fired at another slaver, his shot striking true. The man dropped his blaster, clutching his shoulder as he stumbled backward. The battle quickly descended into chaos. Zara and Cade fought side by side, their movements instinctively coordinated despite their brief partnership. Zara's defiance burned bright as she faced down her captors, her strikes fueled by weeks of pent-up rage. Another slaver lunged at her, a knife gleaming in his hand. She parried the attack with her pipe, the metal clanging loudly. With a twist of her wrist, she disarmed him and delivered a powerful kick to his chest, sending him sprawling. "You're good," Cade muttered as he fired at another attacker. "Better than good," Zara retorted, ducking under a swinging baton and landing a brutal strike to her opponent's ribs. Despite their skill, the sheer number of slavers began to overwhelm them. Cade's blaster hummed with warning, its energy reserves nearly depleted. Zara's pipe was dented and cracked, her arms growing tired. "They just keep coming." Zara growled, her breath labored. Cade glanced around, his mind racing. He spotted an old fuel tank nearby, its rusted surface marked with warning symbols. An idea formed, risky but their only chance. "Cover me," he shouted, sprinting toward the tank. Zara didn't hesitate. She stepped forward, swinging her pipe with renewed vigor to hold off the advancing slavers. Her movements were swift and unrelenting, but even she could feel her strength waning. Cade reached the fuel tank and planted a small explosive device on its side. The slavers noticed too late, their leader shouting, "Stop him. Zara, run." Cade yelled, dashing back toward her. Zara turned, her eyes widening as she realized his plan. She followed him, the slavers hot on their heels. The explosion rocked the industrial zone, a fiery blast engulfing the area where the slavers had been standing. The force of it threw Zara and Cade to the ground, debris raining around them. The two lay in the rubble, catching their breath as the dust began to settle. Cade pushed himself up first, extending a hand to Zara. "You okay?" he asked. Zara took his hand, her grip firm. "I've been worse." They surveyed the destruction, the slavers either incapacitated or retreating. The leader was nowhere to be seen, likely buried beneath the wreckage. Cade glanced at Zara, a faint smile on his lips. "That was close." "Too close," she replied, brushing dust from her arms. "But effective." He nodded, his expression turning serious. "We need to keep moving. This isn't over." Zara hesitated, her violet eyes studying him. For the first time, she felt a flicker of trust. "Lead the way, human. I'm with you." Together, they disappeared into the shadows of the industrial zone, their fragile alliance forged stronger by fire and survival. The industrial zone was eerily silent after the explosion, save for the faint crackle of flames and the groaning of twisted metal. Cade led Zara through the maze of rubble, his movements purposeful and his eyes scanning for any sign of pursuit. Zara followed closely, her battered pipe still clutched in her hands. "Do you always make your plans up as you go?" Zara asked, her tone carrying a mix of sarcasm and genuine curiosity. Cade smirked. "Improvisation is a survival skill. You seem to handle it pretty well yourself." Zara didn't respond, but a faint smile tugged at the corners of her lips. As they navigated the wreckage, she couldn't shake the growing sense of respect she felt for the human. Despite the danger, his resolve never wavered, and his quick thinking had saved them more than once. Eventually, they reached the edge of the industrial zone, where the ruins gave way to a dense, sprawling undercity. The air here was thick with smog, and the dim light barely penetrated the crisscrossing pipes and towering structures above. "This place looks worse than the auction hall," Zara muttered, her sharp eyes scanning the shadows. Cade nodded. "It's not much better, but we're less likely to be found here. The slavers won't risk chasing us into this territory." "Why not?" Zara asked, her suspicion evident. "Because it's controlled by someone even they fear," Cade replied, his voice low. Zara tensed, her grip on the pipe tightening. "And we're walking right into it?" Cade stopped, turning to face her. "We don't have a choice. We need allies, and this is the only place we might find them." Before Zara could protest, a low growl echoed from the shadows. She spun around, her pipe raised defensively. From the darkness emerged a group of figures, their silhouettes tall and imposing. Their leader, a hulking alien with rough, scaled skin and piercing yellow eyes, stepped forward. "Cade," the alien rumbled, his voice deep and gravelly. "You've got a lot of nerve showing up here." Cade raised his hands in a gesture of peace. "Iraq, I need your help." The alien, Iraq, studied Cade for a moment before his gaze shifted to Zara. His eyes narrowed. "And who's this? Another stray you've decided to save?" Zara bristled, stepping forward. "I'm not a stray, and I don't need saving." Iraq chuckled, a sound more menacing than amused. "Feisty. I like her." Cade lowered his hands, his tone firm. "We don't have time for games, Iraq. The slavers are after us, and they won't stop until we're dead. I need safe passage out of the city." Iraq tilted his head, his gaze thoughtful. "And why should I risk my people for you?" "Because I've helped you before," Cade said, his voice steady. "And because I know you hate the slavers as much as I do." The room fell silent as Iraq considered Cade's words. Finally, he nodded. "Fine. But this won't be free." "It never is," Cade muttered under his breath. Iraq motioned for his people to stand down, and the tension in the air eased slightly. He turned to Zara, his expression curious. "You've got spirit. What's your story?" Zara hesitated, her defiance faltering under his intense gaze. "I was a prisoner, sold like property. Cade got me out." Iraq's yellow eyes gleamed. "Then you're lucky to be alive. But if you want to survive out here, you'll need more than luck." Cade stepped between them. "She's got more than enough. Now, can we move?" Iraq smirked, clearly enjoying the interaction. "Follow me." The group moved deeper into the undercity, the air growing colder and more oppressive. Zara stayed close to Cade, her mistrust of Iraq and his people clear. Despite her unease, she couldn't deny that their presence offered a sense of safety she hadn't felt in weeks. They reached a hidden chamber, its walls lined with old weaponry and makeshift defenses. Arak gestured to a map spread out on a metal table. "This is your way out," he said, pointing to a route that led through a series of old tunnels. "But it's dangerous. You'll need to move fast." "Danger is nothing new," Cade replied, studying the map. "Thanks, Arak." Arak grunted. "Just remember this, human, you owe me." Cade nodded, his expression serious. "I won't forget." As they prepared to leave, Zara glanced at Cade. "Do you trust him?" Cade shrugged. "Not entirely. But he hates the slavers more than he likes betraying people, so for now, we're safe." Zara smirked. "That's comforting." Together, they stepped back into the shadows, the map their only guide and their resolve their only defense against what lay ahead. The air in the tunnel was thick and stifling, the oppressive darkness broken only by the faint light from Cade's flashlight. The damp walls glistened with moisture, and the faint sound of dripping water echoed through the narrow passage. Zara followed close behind, her steps careful but steady. The map Arak had given them was folded in Cade's hand, and every so often, he glanced at it to confirm their direction. "This doesn't feel like a safer route," Zara muttered, her voice low. Cade glanced back at her. "It's not about safety. It's about staying hidden." Zara's sharp eyes scanned the shadows. "Hidden from slavers, sure. But what else lives down here?" Cade didn't answer immediately, his silence confirming her suspicions. "Just stay alert," he said finally. The tunnel twisted and turned, its layout like a labyrinth designed to disorient. The farther they went, the more the air grew stale and cold. Zara's senses were on high alert, her ears picking up faint, unfamiliar sounds, a low growl, the distant scrape of claws against stone. "What was that?" she whispered, her grip tightening on her makeshift weapon. "Trouble," Cade replied grimly, raising his blaster. Ahead, the tunnel opened into a larger chamber, its floor littered with debris and jagged rocks. The faint glow of bioluminescent fungi cast an eerie light, revealing movement in the shadows. Zara froze, her violet eyes narrowing as she spotted the source, a pack of creatures, low to the ground and covered in chitinous armor. Their glowing eyes locked onto the pair, their growls filling the air. "Ravagers," Cade muttered. "Stay close." The creatures moved as one, circling their prey with unsettling precision. Zara raised her pipe, her heart pounding but her resolve firm. "How do we get past them?" she asked. "We don't," Cade said, aiming his blaster. "We fight." The first Ravager lunged, its sharp claws aiming for Cade's legs. He fired, the shot hitting its mark and sending the creature sprawling. Another leapt toward Zara, its jaws snapping. She dodged to the side, swinging her pipe with all her strength. The impact cracked the creature's exoskeleton, and it screeched in pain. The chamber erupted into chaos as more Ravagers swarmed, their movements quick and relentless. Zara and Cade fought side by side, their survival instincts driving their every move. Zara's pipe struck another Ravager, the force of her blows sending it skittering across the chamber. She turned to see Cade firing at two more, his shots precise despite the chaos. "There's too many." Zara shouted, her voice strained. Cade glanced around, his mind racing. He spotted a narrow passage on the far side of the chamber, partially obscured by rubble. "There," he shouted, motioning for Zara to follow. They moved together, dodging and striking as they made their way toward the passage. A Ravager lunged at Cade, its claws grazing his arm. He grunted in pain but didn't slow down, firing a shot that sent the creature tumbling. Zara reached the passage first, turning to see Cade just steps behind. She swung her pipe at a Ravager that was closing in on him, the blow knocking it aside. "Go!" Cade shouted, pushing her into the passage. They scrambled through the narrow corridor, the Ravager's growls fading as the creatures lost interest. The passage eventually opened into another tunnel, quieter but no less foreboding. Cade leaned against the wall, catching his breath. His arm bled from the Ravager's attack, but he waved Zara off when she stepped toward him. "I'm fine," he said. "You don't look fine," Zara retorted, her tone sharp but concerned. Cade smirked faintly. "I've had worse." Zara sighed, her tension easing slightly as she glanced back toward the chamber they had escaped. "What were those things?" "Ravagers," Cade said, his voice steady despite his exhaustion. "Underground predators. They don't usually bother with groups this small, but we must have wandered into their territory." "Great," Zara muttered. "What's next? Lava pits?" Cade chuckled softly. "Let's hope not." They continued through the tunnel, their steps slower but determined. The air grew colder, and the sound of rushing water echoed faintly in the distance. As they approached the source, the tunnel opened into a vast underground river. The water churned violently, its surface reflecting the faint glow of the bioluminescent fungi. "How are we supposed to cross that?" Zara asked, her frustration clear. Cade scanned the area, his eyes landing on a series of old, rusted pipes spanning the river. "Carefully," he said, motioning for her to follow. They climbed onto the pipes, their movements cautious as they balanced above the raging water. The metal creaked under their weight, but it held. Halfway across, the pipe shifted suddenly, and Zara nearly lost her footing. Cade grabbed her arm, steadying her. "Thanks," she muttered, her pride bruised but her gratitude genuine. "Don't mention it," Cade replied, his grip firm until she regained her balance. They reached the other side safely, the pipe groaning in protest as they stepped off. Zara exhaled heavily, her tension finally easing. "Please tell me we're close," she said. Cade nodded, checking the map. "We're almost there. Just a little farther." As they moved deeper into the tunnel, the faint sound of voices reached their ears. Zara tensed, her grip tightening on her pipe. "Who is that?" she whispered. Cade's expression darkened. "We're about to find out."